Hey, this is Jeff with a few notes at the top. In the spirit of Halloween, this podcast is a grab bag of tricks and treats for your ears. Today's episode is the audio from a panel I co-moderated for StokerCon 2025. We'll be bringing you more panel discussions this year, along with some other new formats. What I'm really excited about is my limited series on the mythology, history, and science of the boogeyman called The Boogeyman is Real. Here are a few clips. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Millican, a science reporter who covers cross-cultural parenting, psychology, and neuroscience.
Many cultures taught me this, but the time where it really stuck was with the Inuit. In the Arctic, one of the moms said, well, we have all these monsters, and that's how we teach children, is with these monsters.
Stephen Bishop, a professor of Africana Studies and Language, Culture, and Literature at the University of New Mexico.
Cautionary tales being something that used to be hugely important for societies around the world. There were ways of teaching children, or even adults for that matter, proper behavior, improper behavior, and that scaring them, even scaring the daylights out of them, was something that was not a bug, but actually a feature.
The Rough and Tumble are a nationally touring free-range folk grass-fed Americana duo consisting of Mallory Graham and Scott Tyler.
One of the reasons we kind of embarked on this project, The Lillifites, is because the story heard as a kid, you see it one way. The story heard as an adult, you're like, wait a second, what is going on here?
Something's really messed up.
It was some guy in a bar in Florida.
Yeah. His name was Gator.
And he heckled us the entire shows. And at the end of the show, he came up to us and he's like, now let's go get a drink. And we were like, okay. And after his third Long Island iced tea, he started talking about his upbringing in the swamps of Florida. At night, as a kid, he would hear these screams in the swamp and he was really afraid of them. And so he had asked his grandmother, what is this sound? What is this sound? And the grandmother said, oh, that's bloody bones. And if you're not good and go to bed, I'm going to throw you out there with bloody bones.
Join us as we continue to share original scary stories, explore our favorite folklore, host holiday specials, and do dueling deep dives of 80s and 90s TV shows like Tales from the Crypt, Goosebumps, and Are You Afraid of the Dark? Now, let's meet our panelists. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeff C. Carter. I'm a horror author and podcaster, and I'll be moderating today along with Paxton Holley. Pax, can you introduce yourself along with our topic?
Yes, Paxton Holley. I host a movie novelization podcast called I Read Movies, and we are here to talk about the art of adapting horror to other mediums, in particular, the novelization.
Let's go around the horn and do some introductions of our panelists. V, starting with you, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, I am V. Castro, and I'm a Mexican-American writer from Texas. I live in the UK now. For purposes of this panel, I've written for Titan, Aliens Vasquez, so for the Aliens franchise, Rebel Moon 1 and 2, and also Belit for Robert E. Howard, Conan, which was super fun. And then I have my other horror work, erotic horror and science fiction and horror romance.
Thank you. Tim Waggoner?
I'm Tim Waggoner, published around 60 novels, a collection of short stories. About half my fiction output has been media tie-in work of all kinds of properties. I've done 9 novelizations, including in the Terrifier franchise and Ty West's X trilogy.
Josh.
Hi, I'm Joshua Millican, Josh to my friends. I'm from the country of California. I'm the author of Teleportasm, which is number 3 in the Killer VHS series. And I am a film novelizationist. My niche seems to be obscure and or cult films.
Tim Lebbon?
Yeah, I'm Tim Lebbon. I've written not quite as many novels as Tim, my fellow Tim. I'm on about 53 now, I think. I've been lucky enough to have a couple of movies made, and I've written screenplays and audio dramas and comics, and just love telling stories in any media. And for this panel, I've done 3 novelizations, Cabin in the Woods, 30 Days of Night, and Kong Skull Island. And I've also written in lots of exciting universes like Star Wars, Alien, Predator, Conan, which is out this year, Firefly, and Hellboy, and other exciting universes that I dipped my toe into. All good fun.
Did anyone have a favorite novelization growing up? I had this copy of Jaws the Revenge that was so weird. It had voodoo in it. The shark was had a psychic connection with this Bokor, and there was a curse on Sheriff Brody's family. It was awesome. Like, I totally loved Great White Shark plus Voodoo was really nice.
I thought it was better than the film.
Couldn't have been worse.
So apparently that was based on the original concept or the original script, and then they pulled out a lot of that stuff. From what I understand, that's how it often goes with novelizations. Did you grow up with a favorite novelization, Tim Lebbon?
Yeah, so mine was, I have vivid memories of reading Raiders of the Lost Ark when I had a hospital visit when I was about 12, just to have a bit of dental work done. And for some reason, I think I remember reading it and finishing it in the hospital and thinking, oh, wow, they write books of these films as well. And it was a bit of a revelation to me. I can't remember how different it was from the film or whether I enjoyed it. Obviously, did enjoy it more than the film because it's a classic. But yeah, that's probably my favorite, just because of the nostalgia thing and reading it in my childhood,
Back to Josh.
The novelization of Halloween, it's a classic for a lot of reasons. It's rare, but it's the only part of the Halloween canon, John Carpenter's Halloween canon, where Michael Myers actually speaks. You hear him talk as a child before the events of the film. And it's just amazing. And with one prologue, it just completely opens up the world to some supernatural elements and just increased my appreciation for the entire franchise.
Interesting. Tim?
It's hard to say. I could say anything by Alan Dean Foster because I read his stuff like crazy when I was a kid. Star Trek: The Motion Picture, primarily because there's like a foreword written by Captain Kirk where he basically confirms he's bisexual, but he's not having sex with Spock, which I thought was hysterical with all the slash fiction that was out there. And then my other favorite, Star Wars, because the original, when it was just the one movie, the original one had the last line is basically said Luke and Leia lived happily ever after, which they had to yank out for the when they reprinted it.
Awkward. V?
I'm going to be a little more dismal and boring, but the answer is no, because we're too poor to buy books. I didn't own any books, really. The only books I had access to is from school, the school library, and then I had no one to take me to the public library. So if the school library didn't have it, I wasn't reading it. I read everything else. And so most of my kind of love for film came from what was on TV again, like being at home alone. It's books I got from school library and then watching stuff on TV. But yeah, I mean, I didn't buy books until I could work as a teenager. So I started working when I was 15, 16, and then I could buy books.
So Pax, I know you have a encyclopedic knowledge of novelizations. Can you remember some of the first ones you encountered?
Yeah. If I'm picking, it would probably be two by Craig Gardner. They were how I discovered novelizations. It would have been Batman '89 and Back to the Future 2. They came out the same year, and I discovered both those that year and read them. And that's how I figured out, like, oh, they make books of these as well. And that's when I started reading novelizations for the first time.
How did everyone here get started with adaptation work? Josh?
I think I represent a different angle in terms of how I began my career or my work as a film novelizationalist. My first fiction book was released by Encyclopocalypse Publications, and about 50 to 75% of their operation is novelizations. So I got to know the company that way. And then I was just able to sort of work my industry contacts. I was editor-in-chief of Dread Central for a few years, so I got to know a lot of screenwriters. And from that point, it was just a matter of who do I know who's written a film, who might be interested in working with me and Encyclopocalypse to bring it to fruition. And, the first one was Forbidden Zone. I'm lucky enough to be friends with Richard Elfman, and we just thought it would be a wild idea. And that's how it started.
Mr. Lebbon?
I think my first movie novelization was Cabin in the Woods for Titan, which was then tied up for a couple of years while the film company went through problems. And I may actually still have the script that was watermarked to me. And it was like, you can't tell anyone about this film. You can't let slip any spoilers. So for a couple of years, I was, people had known I'd written this novelization. They were saying, well, haven't seen the film yet. When's it going to come out? What happens in it? I said, I can't tell you. Yeah, Cabin in the Woods, first novelization, but the first, if we're talking tie-in stuff as well, my first tie-in novel, I think, was Hellboy for Simon & Schuster. I'd written a couple of Hellboy novels. And that was through my good mate, Chris Golden, who was editing a line of Hellboy books. So that was my first sort of playing in another person's sandbox.
V?
Yeah, interesting story. So the first time I talked about it, I talked to Mr. Waggoner here. I remember I was like, oh, I'd love to write Aliens. I'd love to get into Vasquez. I'd love Predator. He's like, here's the email to the editor, Steve Saffel, who no longer works for Titan. But Steve didn't get back to me. And then, so I was like, okay, I didn't want to push. And then I was talking to Christopher Golden about it. And he's like, okay, this has to happen. So then Steve was like, okay, what do you got? And I wrote the outline for Vasquez because, as we know in the film, the actress is a Latina, and the canon is, she was in a gang in East LA and she was locked up for murder. And I was like, well, okay, can we get into it more? And so I've always wanted to write it because, going back to film, we had like Maria Conchita Alonso, we had Anna and Predator, and then we had Vasquez, but she's not even Latina. So it was really important for me to write it. And then Rebel Moon, off the back of Vasquez, they said, hey, do you want to pitch? And I was like, yeah, hell yes. And I did, and I got the gig. And then B-Lit was just like, hey, you want to write it? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. So, it is definitely who you know in the industry, but also like I had been manifesting writing an Alien, specifically Vasquez, and a Predator novel, which I'm still manifesting. I'm still like, universe, where's my Predator? But yeah, again, thanks to Tim and Chris, kind of advocating. So that's kind of just how it snowballed, I guess.
So I would like everyone watching to stay tuned. At the end, we will be including Christopher Golden's email. So that seems to be the quickest route into the industry. Tim Waggoner, how'd you get your start?
Well, the first tie-in I did was novel was for White Wolf way back when they were doing the Vampire the Masquerade. They also had another game called Vampire Dark Age. It took place in medieval times, and they were doing it. I'd done a short story for them, and then they were doing a 12 novel series, and they wanted me to do number 10, I think. So I did, and it was gone for a long time, but they just, Crossroads Press have brought out the book. It's Dark Ages Gangrel. So it's back out in trade paperback and ebook, which is very cool. The first novelization I did, I had already done like several Supernatural books, books based on Sam and Dean from Supernatural. Original Adventures for Titan. And then one day they just asked me if I wanted to do Resident Evil, the final chapter. And I was like, yes, please. And I had watched all the movies, and I was horrified when I got the script because the one right before it ends with this gigantic battle between all the characters from the franchise and thousands upon thousands. They're standing on top of like the White House, and all these things are coming in. And I'm like, the movie began, the one I did begins with, Alice climbing out of the sewer, and there's nothing around. There's nobody else. There's no dead bodies. There's nothing. And I was like, what? So I wrote a 60-page mini book about that battle that I stuck in the front of it. I didn't bother asking permission. I just did it to see if they'd let me keep it. And they did. So I was very excited. And then after that, all the other ones have been just people asking me. I've been lucky that way.
There's a saying that great books make bad movies. And I think the common wisdom is that novels excel at presenting a character's inner life, which can be hard to translate to a visual medium. What are the challenges and rewards of working in the other direction, going from a purely visual medium to prose? Tim Lebbon, what's your take?
Well, yeah, you can get inside characters' heads and, investigate their motivation. And like V did with Vasquez, you investigate their background and their histories and things like that, which often you won't see in a movie. It opens the whole world up. I'm thinking sort of specifically of the Kong Skull Island movie that I novelized, really got into the character motivations more, why they were going there, who they were, what their background was. Yeah, and also you get to expand their stories as well. This is probably jumping onto a later question, but you can tell more adventures that the characters have. And what I found, something both V and Tim have said is you do your first one or two tie-ins or novelizations, and then you get offered more. And I think part of the joy of it is delivering something fairly good, that people enjoy and people get more out of than they would have. They discover more about the story than they do in the film, and that's the important thing to do. I've never just tried to translate it rote, scene for scene onto the page, because people have seen the movie. They want to know more. They want to know what the characters are doing and why, and motivations and background and history. You're still world building, even though you're presented with the world in the movie. You're still very much a case of world building.
Are you given extra materials like a story Bible or storyboards or anything like that? Do you come in at the end of the process, or do you come in very, very early in the process of adapting a script to film? My experience is you're very late in the process. And they've, I think all 3 movies I've novelized, they've said, oh, we can't send you the scripts that they have. I've said, oh, yeah, please. And then you get it and you can put it in the Word file, and you've got scene by scene, action by action. But yeah, usually pretty late in the process. When I did 30 Days of Night, I sort of did the first 10,000 words. And then they said, oh, by the way, here's the shooting script. And it was totally different. So I had to go and completely start again. Yeah. So I don't know what you other guys, your experience has been with it. V, you had a good experience with
Rebel Moon. Yeah, that was fantastic. And what's so crazy is, like, a lot of people are like, oh, that movie ain't shit, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you, that book, the novelization, was #1 in Brazil for like a year or something. People in Brazil were getting like were just messaging me left, right, in Turkey. Like, they loved it. Everybody else was obsessed with Rebel Moon. Yeah, I got the script, and then I had to it wasn't the final script. And then I got to see it in the Netflix offices in London. Then I went to LA, and that was an amazing experience, but they changed so much constantly. I had to constantly like keep up with it, and so many drafts, so many like, oh, well, you can't. And also, because they had such a huge budget, they're doing a podcast, they're doing a comic, they're doing da-da-da-da-da. They're like, you can't touch this, or this, or this, or this, or this. Okay. But then when they said, oh, write the backstory, go for it. Like, I went ham, and I do like writing erotic fiction, erotic horror. And in the rated R version, the extended 3-hour film, there's a lot of sex. And at one point they were reading and they're like, oh, you can write more. And I was like, cracks knuckles. And people, seriously, one of the scenes people are still talk about, they're like, oh man, when you did that tentacle scene with Noble and he's got those tentacles on him, and I was like, yep. Oh yeah. So it is fun. And and those things were not in the script, but the fact that they were like, yeah, lean into it. And it does open up the film. So I had a lot of people say, I like the books better than but again, you're limited to what you can, especially when you have a streamer like Netflix. I'm sure they had said like, no, we want this formula, because they want return on investment. So there's a lot more freedom in novelizations, and you can get like all of the, with Cora, I wanted to get, she's a hard woman, but I also wanted to show the femininity. I did the same thing with Vasquez, who's really hard and she's got this body, but I wanted to also reach into her femininity and to those vulnerable soft places and her fears and what makes her tick as a woman. People questioned her sexuality, and I was able to address it without them saying, oh no, you can't. Aliens, I did have to pull back on the sex, which is okay. But I'm glad that they were, allowed me to write her as a bisexual woman, and show in the book her relationships with a woman and a man. Obviously, she has 2 children from the relationship, but that's very real. There are a lot of bisexual women who end up having children and will either end up with a woman or a man. It's just showing real life to these characters, the messiness, the complications of what reality is.
Tim, you had mentioned that there's a couple franchises where you've come in pretty late into the series of books or movies. Is it difficult to carve out elbow room to adapt and to innovate and to enrich when you are book 10 in a 12-book series?
Well, I mean, the thing I mentioned about White Wolf, I mean, all they did was say, here's a little bit from the book before and here's a little bit from the book after you have to set up. And so that was pretty easy. with, Resident Evil, since it was the last movie in the series, I'd seen all the other movies. So, I picked up a couple of the novelizations so I could go through and add some stuff to that. But I just did that for fun. I don't think they were paying me extra to do that. So yeah, everything except for the novelization of X, everything that I've done novelization wise has been a sequel. So that and a sequel to movies I've seen. So that's worked out pretty well. Yeah. So the challenging thing, first off, is that it doesn't matter the movie script. It usually makes, if you just typed up the script as a story, it'll make about 45,000 words. And if you got to do 80,000 words, you have to do pretty much like half of the book is you in a lot of ways. And I don't think people understand that. I think they do think that novelizations are just typing up the script and putting quotation marks around dialogue, and it's not. The other thing, like, V was talking about, is that you don't, and Tim too, you don't know which damn script you're going to get. When I did Kingsman: The Golden Circle, I got one script. My editor got a different script. We didn't know until I gave her my first draft. And she said, "What the hell is this?" And so I got her script and I wrote a version. And then they had me fly out to Hollywood to watch a rough cut of the movie. The director decided I had to. And I was just glad to hear V got to do that too, because as far as I know, I'm like we're the only two, because they never do that ever. They don't show you anything. They don't give you anything, nothing.
Yes, you're the only two. I've never been flown to LA. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, and it was so glamorous. The worst part was couldn't use my computer. I had to watch the movie and take notes by hand, and the director said I had to write down everything. And so there was the projectionist stopped the movie every minute so I could go ahead and write it down. It took like 6 hours to watch that movie. It was a nightmare. But then finally I had 3 versions of this story, and I was like, well, the hell with it. I'm going to make my book out of the stuff I like best from all 3. So I just kind of cobbled it together, and I guess they were happy enough with it. But the other challenge, though, is sometimes you get people that they don't tell you, what your restrictions are before they see, the book. The people I did the novelization of Halloween Kills, and their script had a lot of times where like an actor would say no 3 times in a row. And an actor can bring sound to that and intensity and all that. You can't write no that way 3 times. So I just make it 1. And they were not happy. It's like I had to put all the dialogue back the way they wanted it.
Oh, wow.
And then doing the X trilogy was super challenging because Ty was like, you can't add anything to my script. And so, I told him, because and A24 has, and he was going to read it. He did read every bit and provide feedback. But A24 has their own publishing arm. And so, the editor there, these were their first novelizations. And I said, that this is only going to be about 40,000 words. And they're like, we don't care. Yeah. And I'm like, ching. That's really good. But it was challenging to find ways to make it a novel and still, not be able to add anything. And so, what I did was my very best to do the interiority of the characters. It helped that the movies had been out, so I could also draw on the performance. Because usually you just get a script and you have no clue. And I kind of treat it like I've got a script that I'm putting on my own production or making my own movie of it when that happens. But I don't know. The X books were kind of a trip. Terrifier books, I could throw in any damn thing I wanted, and Damien didn't care. He checked it all. He only had me take out the last line of Terrifier 2, and I had to add a line for Terrifier 3.
So the line where you said they live happily ever after, you had to take that part out.
No, I just guessed how art may come back to life, and I was wrong. That's why I made it the last line of the book, so I could just take it out.
Easy. Joshua, you said you adapt a lot of cult films. So these are long done. There's not going to be any changes to the scripts. However, you may have a niche fan base that is super rabid about these movies and has probably been living with those movies in their heads for years before they encounter the novelization. So they've sort of made up their own story or backstory or sequel to it. What has it been like writing in that cult movie space?
It's been great. And, my experience is different from the other 3 authors' experience in exactly how you're saying. These films have been around for a long time. And they do have their built-in audience. So when they get a novelization, they're probably less interested in what the original script was, and they're more interested in expanding on what they love about the movie. They don't want you to change someone's profession or change certain aspects of the plot structure. They want kind of everything they love about the movie plus. And there are some situations where I have a screenplay and the film, and there are scenes in the screenplay that never made it in the film, and I get to kind of put them together, and that's a lot of fun. But for Chopping Mall, which is probably what I'm best known for, there was no script. They actually had a few pages of one deleted scene, but I didn't have the original to look from, so there was nothing for me to like start with as a base. I had to watch the film with the subtitles on. But it's exactly like what Tim Lebbon said. The main thing about novelizations is that you get inside the character's head, which you don't do in film unless it's like Fight Club. But, films with narrators are very hit and miss. I had to, honor the original, but I had to just kind of like expand in ways that I knew that the fan base would appreciate. And I was able to do that by getting into the character's head. There's a very famous scene in Chopping Mall where the three female protagonists are escaping the killer robots by crawling through a ventilation duct. And two of the women are really strong. And one woman, Susie, played by Barbara Crampton, is really having a breakdown. She's the one who can't handle it. She's having a panic attack, but we don't know why, and as a novelizationist, oh my goodness. Watching the film without a script, without any insight, I looked for things like that where I could be like, okay, why is Susie the only one who's freaking out? Let me get inside her head. And so I'm able to then give a little backstory where Susie, when she was 9 years old, she was playing hide and seek with her cousins, and she accidentally hid inside an old refrigerator, and she got stuck in there. Mm-hmm. And not only was it claustrophobic, it was on a summer day, so it was really getting hot. So then it totally makes sense. You've got, Susie up in there. She's having flashbacks. It's undoing years of therapy. In addition to being chased by killer robots, she's, basically experiencing her own version of hell. So doing things like that was great. There's another instance in Chopping Mall where the main character, Allison, she kind of notices a display of flares. And for some reason, she doesn't see anything. She goes over, she looks at the flares, she grabs them, she kind of stuffs it into her shirt. And that just becomes so crucial, 30 minutes later at the very end of Act 3. Well, what was she thinking? Why did she think, well, maybe I'll need a flare later down the line? And it has to do with something her dad always told her. Anyway, I don't want to give any more of my insights away, but it's great working with films that people already love, that people are already familiar with, and then being trusted to add things that I feel, and hopefully the screenwriter agrees, will only enhance the appreciation for the film.
Thanks.
I would love to do Basket Case. I'm just putting it out there. Honestly, Joshua, if you know anybody Basket Case, I love that one.
Hey, I'll see what I can do. I want to do Chud. That's my dream.
Chud, yeah. Excellent.
All right, if you take Chud, then I'm doing Chud 2, Bud the Chud.
you can do Bud the Chud as long as I get the original.
Paxton, you have surveyed so many novelizations. Are there any things that were brought into the adaptations that you thought were really misses or just filler? Like, what are some of the strangest things you've seen in a novelization?
Yeah, it's interesting. And you guys are covering one of my things that fascinate me about novelizations is leeway and how much you actually get to do in adapting the subject. And like a couple of things like in James Caan's Goonies novelization, he takes one chapter and does it from Chunk's point of view, like just takes you on a completely different version of the story, which I find interesting. The Karate Kid 3 novelization, which those are pretty slight anyway, but Karate Kid 3 novelization makes a very interesting choice to do everything from Daniel's point of view. And I mean that strictly Daniel's point of view. Like, you don't know the bad guy Silver is a bad guy until the very end. You don't see any of the extra scenes. You don't know Kreese is there till the very end. So it's like you're just there with Daniel the whole time. And then you think silver's fine until the very end. So it's a very interesting way to read that book, and if you know the movie very well. And so like these are the kind of tricks that I find super interesting. And hearing you guys talk about it, how you tend to be fenced in, right? Like you're writing in someone else's playground and you're fenced in. And I was just very curious, like how you guys handle that and how much leeway you get to kind of do your own thing in this. And was there anything you did that you weren't allowed to do, that you were told, no, you really can't do that, even though you were trying to make it your own?
The engineers. I wrote the engineers in because I'm personally fascinated by the engineers, just like on a woo-woo spiritual, like these beings there, and they're like, nope, you can't mention them, you can't talk about them, you can't sniff, they don't exist, pretend they don't exist. I'm like, okay, no engineers, sorry. Obviously, I did say, hey, I think it's kind of not a great stereotype that Vasquez is this, and this. And they're like, well, it's canon. That's what they wrote about her. And I was like, okay, well, then we're going to talk about police brutality. We're going to talk about women of color being subject to violence more than others, women. We're going to talk about all of profiling. And they let me do it. They let me talk about bisexuality, but they were like, no engineers, no, which was interesting. And then for Rebel Moon, it was just about the other projects they had and what they were going to go into the story in other types of media. And then B-Lit. So I had to, I read everything that there was on her. There's been so much that's kind of gone fan fiction-y and off the rails. And they're very much like, no, you need to stick with like this, and this. And it was like a 6,000 word story, and there's not a lot about her. So they wanted her to still be very true. But again, I had to pull back on the sex, but other than that, they were pretty good about it. But Conan's not in it, which I would have loved to done like their kind of like love story and like fighting and kind of an enemies to lover thing. But I did something totally different. And
I had a couple subplots in Chopping Mall. One of them they left in, it was really small, but one of them they asked me to take out. And I think it was just because the screenwriter was kind of sensitive. I think the entire production, everyone involved in Chopping Mall feels very protective of it. And so I think my editor decided that it was best to just take it out. But if you guys have seen either of the covers for Chopping Mall, there's this humanoid robot hand on both versions, and there is no humanoid robot in the film. There are these R2D2 looking things with claws. So I wrote a subplot where there is a humanoid robot with hands that just kind of like transforms, and there's a big battle on the roof of the mall. And I was asked to take that out, which I understand though, because the film is completely takes place completely in the mall. You never see outside the mall. There's not a single moment that doesn't take place in the mall. So I understood that in a sense, keep it inside the mall. But that was something that I wanted to add. I always wanted to explain why there's a robot hand when there are no robots with hands. But yeah, I had to take that out.
V mentioned something interesting. She had mentioned fan fiction. There's a lot of fan fiction out about certain characters. I think the internet has probably spawned a lot more fan fiction. And then Tim, you had mentioned slash fic early on with Star Trek. Is there a blurry line between novelization and fan fiction, or do you ever encounter resistance if you take a side character and say, this is who they are, this is their love life, this is how they lived or died, when there is a large body of very, very fanatical fan fiction out there?
No, I don't really think about the fan fiction at all. When I'm very aware that there are fans though, so I try to be in general as respectful as I can. But I also know that there's a million different versions of every movie for every audience member, and so I have to do mine and the best I can. Yeah, I mean the only thing that happened was I killed off everybody and that all the characters that were lined up to fight at the end of the previous Resident Evil movie. They since they didn't show up and there's no mention of them, I killed them all off in very clear ways. And I had a woman email me that she was very upset I killed Jill Valentine off because that was her favorite character. And I was like, it's not real. It's just, this is my version. You can have your own version where Jill Valentine, kills Alice or whatever and goes off and fights everything herself and defeats everything.
Also, nobody stays dead in Resident Evil.
That's true.
Tim, Lebbon, do you have anything to add to that general topic?
Yeah,
about...
only that it's obvious that each project's quite different, and our rail tracks are quite different. The rules of what we can and can't do. So 30 Days of Night, I delivered to my editor when I wrote. That was a weird project because it was comic to movie, and then I wrote the novel, so that was a bit odd. But I had great fun doing it. And a couple of things about that project. The first thing, I delivered it to my editor, and he read it, and he came back and he said, "It's brilliant. I love it. It's fantastic." And then 2 days later, he came back and said, "Oh, you've changed some of the dialogue," and I'd expanded on some of the dialogue or substituted some of it. And he said, "It's all going to have to go back in." That's not the case with every project. The Cabin in the Woods wasn't like that. Kong Skull Island. Going back to what Tim said about if you novelize a script without adding to it, you can get to like 50, 60,000 words, which is what I did on Skull Island. I thought, oh fuck, I finished. I better add another monster attack, which I did. There's a giant snake in my novel that doesn't appear in the movie. I'm not going to call it padding. I'm going to call it going outside the boundaries of the movie. And the 30 Days of Night, I added a scene. I love the movie. I think this scene would have made it better if a polar bear wanders into Barrow and the vampires play with it like cats play with a mouse, and then they kill it. And I really love that scene. This is an interesting aside. That scene led to me and Chris writing a trilogy because we were just chatting over a meal at one convention, I think it was Toronto World Horror, and mentioned that I'd done this polar bear thing in 30 Days of Night. And Chris said, "Vampire polar bears." And I said, "We can do that." So we wrote a trilogy of novels based on Jack London, called Calls of the Wild and White Fangs, and sold it to Hollywood. Nothing ever happened, but from that little scene I put in this novel, we wrote 3 books that sold quite well, optioned it and wrote the script. And it just shows that, sometimes novelizations and tie-in work, not so much nowadays, but, I'm getting older and crustier. And back in the day, it was sort of frowned upon by some people. It was like, why are you doing a novelization? Why are you doing tie-in work? Number one, because I'm a fanboy. We're all fans at heart. So, I've never done a novelization that I didn't want to do. It just shows that doing stuff like this can sort of expand your repertoire and lead to other great, exciting projects.
What advice would you all give to writers who are looking to find adaptation? And Joshua, start with you.
Assassinate Tim Waggoner. No, I'm just kidding. But, seriously, maybe you could save a few for the rest of us. I'm just kidding. Giving you a hard time. Like I said before, I think I represent kind of an entrepreneurial spirit in terms of how I got into novelizations, using my connections with cult filmmakers, indie filmmakers, and my connections to the publishing world to create potential projects. So, if you're a writer, if you've been in Hollywood for a while and you have connections like that you can leverage, that's a great place to start. I would also say, if you're a screenwriter, maybe try turning one of your screenplays into a novel. I mean, now we're kind of getting outside of novelizations, but, a couple of you guys have talked about how, when you take a screenplay, you basically have like such a great structure for a novel already. So I would encourage screenwriters to think about novelizing their own screenplays, even if there's not a film. And if you have an entrepreneurial spirit like me, you can start courting screenwriters and distributors who own the distribution rights, novelization rights for some films that you love. Just not Chud. That's mine.
I would say, you should, having an agent is very helpful because they can approach their contacts. And yeah, like Josh said, whatever contacts you have, again, Chris and Tim, just again, like at a con, just talking, shooting the shit at the bar. And it happened. And actually Aliens, I wrote a rough fan fiction, an Alien versus Predator, because I love Alien. I would love an Aliens versus Predator book set in South America. And I want to do the 80s, bring Anna back and do like a real badass, like in the jungle, in a mine. I wrote a whole thing, believe me. But I first wrote it as Alien versus Predator book as a piece of fan fiction. And then when I finally got to a point where it was like, oh shit, this could really happen, I took it off online. I took it offline and wrote everything that I had because they said, sorry, we don't have the license for that, but do you want an aliens book? I'm like, yes. But again, I think, when it comes to tie-in work, it is about connection, really, unless you're like a really big name and you get approached. And just, again, keep going, keep hustling. I do it because I love it. I'm a big, I fangirl over all the films, and I love what I do, my original work, but this is just something that's really special. It brings out that inner child. It's playtime almost. It's not always easy, obviously, the bureaucracy of it, but it's different. It hits different to writing your own work. And also I can write it quite quickly because I already have like the outline. I'm a pantser. So if I have an outline, I have what I need to do, I can just like pump out those words very quickly. And it's fun, and it takes the mental stress away from writing original stuff. But I think, unfortunately, if you're like, oh, I really want to do it, it can be a slow in. It can be. You just have to be persistent and keep going and just doing the best you can with your own work and making connections and not being a jerk in the business.
Yeah, the V speaks a lot of truth. Number one, don't be a dick. Number two, the way I found my way into tie-in stuff is making a bit of a, impact with my own writing. I think I probably published 20 novels before I published a tie-in novel. And then you get editors interested in you. And then editors that you'd work with on other projects might come with you, your own projects. They'll come to you and ask if you want to do a tie-in. Like I did a Star Wars novel purely because I'd written some really dark fantasy, sword and sorcery type stuff, and Conan as well. V, I've written an Alien Predator trilogy, right?
Yes.
Right, there you go. And so they do have the license, so keep pushing that, definitely.
But I think they've run through all the books or something, like the ones.
Right, okay.
Yeah, they have, but they've run through, and I'm just like, well, and I'm hearing, you're the first one who's gonna get. Like, I better get that Predator book.
Keep pushing, keep pushing. That was a weird one because the first one they said, it's got to be 80% Predator and 20% Alien because it was a trilogy, all one story, and the second one's got to be 80% Alien, 20% Predator, and the third one could be 50-50. So it was pretty restrictive in some way, but also it was my own big, far future space war story with aliens and predators. So much fucking fun that with those trilogies.
So it sounds like it could be disheartening if the advice of how do you get adaptation work is you need to have an agent and you need to have connections in Hollywood to the people who own the rights or make all of these films and greenlight these productions. But it also sounds like another point of contact is your editors, the people you work with, by building up a body of work that they can point to and say, okay, this person understands genre, they understand story structure. We feel confident that they can handle a IP that we're very protective of. Tim Waggoner, do you feel like being able to grasp character voice is a really important tool when it comes to adaptation, since you might be hopping from one set of characters to the next? From Supernatural to Resident Evil, do you think they look for the ability to write in different character voices?
I don't know if I think it's very important. And, you also have to write the sort of the character of the world or the universe, what can happen. I mean, in the Kingsman movies, comedy things happen that, don't happen in other kinds of franchises. And you have to have the feel of it when you do any kind of tie-in work, I think is in many ways more important than anything else. I think that one of the big things they look for is your ability to collaborate, because you're not the boss. You can't just do the stuff that you want. So they want to know: can you work with an editor? Can you take feedback? Can you make changes? And because, like a number of us have said, that you don't get a lot of time to do them, they want to know you can write fast. They want to know you can make deadlines, and so that's why it's not really an entry level kind of thing. But I did, when I went to AuthorCon, I did a workshop on novelizations, and one of the attendees was the author Kat Velour. And I learned from her that what she does is she would approach, like at a con, people who, made this small movie, whatever it was. She would say, hey, how about I do the novelization? Well, I'll take care of all the publishing, self-publishing stuff, and then we'll split the money. And she's done too. She's done Virus Shark and Puppet Shark, and she's working to do some more. And I was like, oh my God, somebody found a complete indie way to start doing novelizations. And now she's working on, trying to move up the food chain a little bit. So she's my hero because she taught me a whole new way that I can go ahead and pass on to other people. And so anybody out there, listening to this is like, they think it's impossible. Start going to where all the big media cons, where all the horror people are. And maybe especially if you have an enthusiasm for it. I met another 2 writers. I mean, I knew them already at AuthorCon that did the same thing by coincidence. I'm not going to tell you who they are, or what movie they're going to do. I pray to God they get to do the novelization because it will be hysterical. But we'll see.
Yeah, I just want to add on that again, deadlines in this world are not normal deadlines, and it isn't your deadline. And you really have to be, like Tim said, respectful. You have to be able to work on a tight deadline and not have excuse after excuse. If you, have any sort of issues, or you have to be able to manage your time, manage this, and be able to focus, because there's a very little wiggle room, and you won't get more work if you're not if you can't adhere to those deadlines, deliver, be able to not be precious about something. Like if they say, no, we want 3 no's, you can't argue and say, yeah, but I'm a writer. Like that isn't going to fly. Your ego check. I always say this: if you really want to do it and you want to do it well and do a lot of it, check your ego at the door. You can't have ego with tie-in stuff. Yes, you can put yourself in, but it is a paid job. It is a job. It's not like you're saying, oh, I want to write this elvish fantasy with cannibal mermaids and you've got to play ball.
I mean, it's important to respect the material, because you are collaborating with another writer. It's a long distance collaboration with one or more writers you may never see or talk to, but it's not just yours. It's not your story. Even if you add things to it, or if it becomes yours through the writing of it, it's still theirs too. And so I'm always mindful that what I'm doing is collaborating with other writers.
Same.
Pax, my cat is screaming, so if you want to field some questions to the panel.
Yeah, well, so Josh laid claim to Chud, and V's laid claim to Basket Case, and possibly Alien Predator. I was wondering if the Tims had a property that they would love to do a novelization for. The shackles are off. You can do past, present, whatever.
I've got one. Yeah, okay. So I'd love to write a novel based on Neil Blomkamp's Alien unmade movie, because I was taught, when I wrote my Alien novel, I was talked through the story of that movie by the guy at Fox, and it would have been awesome. And really, it's Alien 3. In a way, it's retconning. It's setting aside Alien 3, but it would have featured Ripley, Hicks, Newt, and Bishop, and it just would have been awesome. There's a load of artwork online that Blomkamp did, and it would be an interesting project to write the novelization of a movie that was never made. Not sure it'll ever happen, or if Fox would ever want it to happen, especially with Alien, the new series coming out and more movies being made. But I've had so much fun in the Alien universe, and out of everything I've written, I mean, I got to write a Star Wars novel, which was great. But when I got a chance to write an Alien novel and a Ripley Alien novel, it was fanboy heaven. That was my, dream come true. Awesome stuff. So I'd love to write another Alien novel.
They just didn't they do like William Gibson's Alien 3? They just released that.
Yes.
I mean, that could be totally something you could do.
Yeah, that was novelized, and it was also done as a terrific audio drama by Dirk Maggs. Yeah. So maybe I should talk to Titan V. I don't know.
Totally.
Honestly, I would love to work with Fede Alvarez, get a whole Fede Alvarez. I'm just like, come on now.
Yeah.
Have you read Vasquez?
Yeah. V. So he probably has read Vasquez.
I know the Latinos would show up for that, because every time I go home, people are like, "Oh, you did it for us." I'm like, "Yes, gente, yes."
Yeah, this is a good place, I guess, for me to mention. I did a Chud short story for an anthology.
Nice.
I got the novelized. I did a short story of the guys in the diner, John Goodman and Jay Thomas, because that was one of my favorites.
Great name. Such a great name.
Yeah. So I guess, I would love to do something like with kaiju. I think it would be a really interesting. How do you write that? Exactly. I think it would be a nice challenge. Plus, I just grew up with those movies when I was a kid. I loved them. So I think that would be a lot of fun. Maybe the old Universal monsters. I loved those as a kid too.
Yeah.
So that would be a lot of fun to write. Even novelizations of some of those movies are just like original adventures with those guys.
Yeah.
Joshua, is there a dream project?
In addition to Chud, there are a few that would mean a lot to me. Some aren't available anymore, but I actually grew up in Los Angeles during the 1980s, during that great horror boom. So I would have liked to have done the novelization for Night of the Comet, but that's gone to another author, and I wish him very well with it. I'm excited to read his take on it. But if there's a film, well, that's why I think I was so perfect for Chopping Mall, because I was younger than the characters in the film at the time, but I grew up during that era, and I felt really well equipped to live in that world, revisit that world that I had known in my own youth.
With some of the other cult films where the directors or actors, do they sort of bend your ear and like, hey, I want you to put this scene in, or I want you to give this character something extra to do?
Yeah, it's more just some of the other panelists have already said, just being really respectful to the screenwriter. I think I did some of my best work as a writer in the novelization of All Through the House, which is a very small indie Christmas horror. And I did at one point sort of overstep my bounds, I think, which is what we've talked about. As a writer, I felt organically that I could trim it down a little bit. I thought, there's a scene where everyone ends up in the basement, and then some other stuff happens and they end up back in the basement. And I was like, well, as a writer, it makes sense that, once you're in the basement, you stay in there. You're at the lowest point, and let's just build the climax from there. And the screenwriter was like, no. We need this sort of like cat and mouse thing at the end. Yeah, she gets out, but then there's this and there's this. And it's like, you're right. I see it from your point of view.
Are there any other mediums that you have been approached for adaptation work, like comic books or video games or television?
Yeah, I got to do a Kolchak, the Night Stalker
nice.
comic story. And that was like one of my bucket list items to write Kolchak. So that was cool.
I would love to do Marvel Predator. I'd love to do, so one of my Chispa Comics adapted one of my short stories, The Kukui of Cancun, to a comic. And I was like, oh my God, yay. So I got to I got to write the comic, and then they did the artwork. But I would absolutely love to do more comic work and do superhero Marvel stuff. Predator for Marvel would be great. I would love to do that. But I'm really open to anything. I'm like, whatever the universe wants to bring me, and I'm just open to it. Again, being, my age, growing up watching all of horror, way too young. I'd like to do it all. I think it's, again, there's a lot of discourse online about how, oh, writers are broke, and you're broke, you're this, you're that, there's no money, and da, 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 and there's constant chatter and all this scarcity chatter. But I do feel like, when you open yourself up and you do tie and you do this, you do that, you start to build up a readership. And I have so many people who've picked up one book and they're like, oh, I loved your tie-in. I just bought 3 more of your books. And, oh, I've read your book, but I saw you did some tie-in. And even, when some of these tie-ins get translated, that's another thing. With the tie-ins, there's a higher kind of rate that they get translated, that they'll get picked up. And that brings you in more readers and can open up even more opportunities. So I'm just open to whatever, because I love it. And it's all part of, growing your readership and also staying, as a working writer, because this is my full-time gig. And I refuse to say, I can't, I don't, I have that confidence, and I'd love to do whatever.
Yeah. Exactly that, B. We're all working writers here, and like I said earlier, it's all storytelling. I love telling stories in whatever media that it happens to pop up. I've written a couple of Hellboy novels, so I've taken the character from, not adapted any comics, but I've told my own stories featuring Hellboy. That was a great fun gig doing those. Mike Mignola, his only comment on one of my novels was Hellboy doesn't have a prehensile tail. That was an easy fix. He doesn't swing from the rafters, actually.
So much for V's writing hack of putting in tentacle sex.
Right. Yeah. I didn't have a Hellboy sex scene, I don't think. It's a while ago since I wrote it. But yeah, we're working writers. And like V said, you bring in readers from other genres. I wrote a Star Wars novel, and I know, and my 2 appearances on the New York Times bestseller list have been tie-in books. One was Star Wars, one was, I think I'm pretty sure it was 30 Days of Night, the novelization. And you hope that your name on the front of that book, however small they print your name, because sometimes it's really fucking small. You hope people will read that and enjoy what you brought to that project, and look for your own stuff. I think the crossover is not massive, but it's when you're writing stuff like Alien and Star Wars, you're selling a lot of books. So even a small crossover onto your own stuff, really good. And also they pay, and it's sometimes I've never done a job that I've not enjoyed, but I have, like we were talking about the speed of writing these things. I did write 2 novels in 2 months once, so I'd never want to do it again. One was a novelization, so it's like screenplay to script to page. And the other was an original tie-in novel. That was like one of these occasions where I'd signed up to one and then another one came along that I couldn't say no to. And then they told me the deadline. It's like, oh, I can sleep in November. But I love it. I love any form of storytelling, and I consider myself quite lucky to be able to dip my toe into universes that I'm a massive fan of.
Joshua, have you had any experience or interest in graphic novels, short form comics, video games, anything like that?
I think video games is probably a real untapped frontier. I mean, they have script writers for video games now. They have character development and backstories. So I think that's probably the next frontier. Horror gaming is its own niche as well. So I haven't been approached for anything like that, but I imagine that that's going to be really big in the future.
Paxton, in addition to novelizations, are there any standout graphic novel adaptations that you are a fan of, or are you aware of any film to video game adaptations that work?
The video game ones are a little bit more dicey. The ones that work the most, particularly for me, were some of the earlier Star Wars ones. Like the one that jumps to mind is the Shadows of the Empire, and they had the novel, they had the graphic novel, they had the soundtrack, but it was like everything but the movie. And they built it all around as if there was a movie, but and so everything was kind of an adaptation of a movie that didn't exist, and it kind of worked that way. And it was odd, but it also still kind of worked. Like the gears still worked and everything. So like it was really neat, and that was one of the best ones that I kind of remember thinking that was really cool, adapting something that didn't actually exist.
I can't pull any examples off the top of my head, but I know there have been some other group projects where people use a fixed point, like a film or a book or a TV show that doesn't exist, and then they write fan fiction around it or adaptations. And somehow, if you have that open collaborative mindset, it seems like, okay, we can all agree that there's a canon, and then we're going to play at the edges of it. And that keeps people from stepping on each other's toes or rewriting the continuity that other people establish. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you all for uniting across these many diverse time zones and sharing information about adaptations and how the sausage is made. Let's go around and let everyone know where they can find you online and where they can find your work. Joshua, starting with you.
Yeah, before that, I just want to thank you, Jeff, and Paxton for having me here. And I'm just, I was a little nervous in the beginning because, you 3 writers are all just really giants in your field. So I feel very lucky just to have been invited along to this program. So thank you all very much. I think my next, there's going to be an announcement soon about my next original novel. So you can follow me on Twitter at Josh_Millican. And on Instagram at Joshua_Millican. And I'd love to talk to you online and stay in touch with me and hear about what I've got coming up next.
Tim Lebbon?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having us. So I still run a website, Do people still run websites? So I'm at timlebbon.net. It's more of a sort of resource now. It's got, every book I've ever written on there, and some I haven't. And I lurk on Facebook and Blue Sky. Not so active on Twitter anymore. Yeah, come and find me, and often found in a bar at conventions as well.
Joe Waggoner?
Just go to my website. It's timwaggoner.com, and you can find anything you would want to, links to anything from there. And just want to mention real quick that I just had a new writing book come out, which is all about writing tie-ins and novelizations. It's called Just Add Writers. So anybody, interested, not because I care about making money, but I like my publishers to make some, but I want to help people too. So, go check that out, because I've got a lot of strategies in there on how you can start to build a media tie-in career.
Excellent. V?
Yeah, I'm on all the things. Okay, so Twitter and Instagram, V Latina London. TikTok, I'm like V Castro Stories or V Castro Books. I don't know. You just put my thing in at my name, whatever. And then I'm on Blue Sky, V Latina London, Pinterest, all the things. So please follow me. I also have a website. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. It's so much fun to hang out.
Thank you guys for sharing your time with us. I'm on Blue Sky mostly. That's probably the best place. I'm under my name, Pax Holley, Holley. And the show I do, I Read Movies, is a monthly podcast where I pick a novelization, and I'm going over the differences between the movie and the book. That is also on Blue Sky under I Read Movies, and it has a website, ireadmovies.com. You can check it out there.
You can find me at jeffc.carter on Instagram. jeffccarter.com is my website. My podcast is We Bleed Orange and Black, and you can find us everywhere podcasts are distributed. Well, thank you to StokerCon. Thank you to our panel. Thank you, Paxton, for helping me do a survey of this topic, and I look forward to seeing all your novelizations soon.
Cheers, guys. Been a pleasure.
Bye.
Cheers.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and follow. We're now on YouTube. Links are in the show notes. You can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.